Brothers and sisters, I'm going to talk about Darwin and the birth of the science. The idea is appealing that species gradually evolve through natural selection, acting on random variations. Variations are occurring all the time by chance, and those that are useful are maintained through natural selection. So in other words, we are the result of a random process. We are the result of chance. Indeed, it seems to reflect, curiously enough, the reality of the world in which we live. Look out the window. There are startups occurring all the time. They are weeded out by competition. Only the fittest survive. No need for a creative, directing agency. What Darwin appears to have done is to project the war of all against all of civil society onto the animal kingdom. Even in Darwin's time, there were difficulties. One small consideration, the fossil record, because the fossil record records a sudden explosion of life in the Cambrian era. A myriad of living things came into existence, and this largely without antecedents. All of a sudden, an explosion of life. Whereas, according to Darwin, all life evolved from a single organism and branched out in a sort of tree-like pattern. The fossil record, on the other hand, shows most animals appearing more or less at the same time, rather than branching out from simpler forms. So the major challenge to the theory of evolution is to explain large-scale changes that lead from one order or class to another, as the transitional forms are absent in the fossil record. How do we get, for example, from an elephant to a giraffe? Darwin, a man of utmost integrity, acknowledged this. He noted that the fossil record in his time was most imperfect. He postulated that further research and exploration would yield evidence in support of his hypothesis, and that if it was not forthcoming, it would constitute a rebuttal. The signature of Darwinism, can be said to be this drawing, presumed to compress 25 million years of imagined human evolution into a row of progressively taller and more erect primates until suddenly a human occurs. In my opinion, this was the birth of the science. The science today is used for all manner of things. It is beyond appeal. It is used to justify everything from lockdowns, social distancing, and face masks. No matter that this is proving incredibly expensive. Science has become a social construct, a social artifact, if you will. As a learned correspondent wrote, to be considered a science, you need a PhD from a government-authorized university and a job with either a government-authorized university, a government agency, or a big company. No one else can be called a scientist. Ben Franklin, a printer by trade, doing electrical experiments, or Thomas Jefferson, a gentleman farmer, doing experiments with plants on his plantation, would not be considered a scientist today. The stakes, brothers and sisters, are quite high. How do we see ourselves? What is our place in the universe? What is our role here? It happened in February 1858 on a remote island in the South Pacific, in the Malay archipelago. It happened. An Englishman, Alfred Russel Wallace, was suffering from an attack of malaria. Feverish in his delirium, suddenly he saw it. He saw it. A vast panorama unfolded for him. The most primitive of species, an amoeba or protozoa, gradually evolving through immense eons of time into a sea of creatures, birds, the land animals, and the guiding mechanism being the survival of the fittest. Between bouts of fever, Wallace gathered sufficient strength and wrote a detailed essay explaining his theory and sent it together with a covering letter to Charles Darwin, who he knew from correspondence was interested in the subject of evolution. This was essentially the same theory that Darwin had been ruminating on for 20 years, but never got around to publishing, as he continued to collect evidence. Wallace's letter prodded Darwin to rush out his famous book the following year to avoid being scooped by Wallace. Darwin panicked on receiving Wallace's letter, writing privately that his life's work was smashed. A couple of his distinguished friends, geologist Charles Lyell and botanist Thomas Hooker, came to his rescue, quickly organizing a joint presentation to the Linnean Society of London on July 1st, 1858, of an unpublished letter and a manuscript by Darwin on natural selection, together with Wallace's letter. This was indeed a singular event in the history of ideas. Thus, Alfred Russel Wallace, a botanist and contemporary of Darwin, is considered the co-discoverer of the concept of evolution. Yet, Wallace's understanding was far deeper and profound. Darwin claims that all biological life can be explained through a directionless process of survival of the fittest and random mutation. Attributes in an organism will only develop when they accord the organism a survival advantage. Wallace, on the other hand, suggests that there are areas of the biological world, suggests that there are areas of the biological world beyond the scope of natural selection's operations, and some purposeful intelligence must be called upon to explain their existence. For example, Wallace reasons that man's intellect, his reason, his artistic and musical ability, his wit, his talents, and most of all, his moral sense, his sense of kindness, compassion, honesty, integrity, of what is right and what is wrong, of doing the right thing. This cannot be explained via the Darwinian mechanism of survival of the fittest and random mutation. Rather, this must be caused by an intelligence that guided evolution. Wallace insisted that man's mind was created by a mind. In place of the primitive materialism of evolution, we have then a natural world that is designed. Wallace enunciated intelligent evolution, that is, evolution as part of a designed and guided universe. In 1910, at the age of 87, Wallace granted an interview to a reporter. It was a bold declaration for intelligent evolution. Whereas Darwin says nothing about the origin of life, Wallace postulates a definite act of creation. As he says, an honest and unswerving scrutiny of natural forces, as he says, an honest and unswerving scrutiny of nature forces upon the mind this certain truth, that at some point in the Earth's history there was an act of creation, a giving to the earth of something which before it had not possessed. And from that gift, the gift of life, has come the infinite and wonderful population of living forms. Then in a subsequent act of creation, according to Wallace, man is given a soul or spirit. He says, nothing in evolution can account for the soul of man. The difference between man and other animals is unbridgeable. In reply to the question, but in any case, you believe that there is purpose in creation? Wallace replies, it meets me everywhere I turn. I cannot examine the smallest or the commonest living thing without finding my reason uplifted and amazed by the miracle, by the beauty, the power, and the wisdom of its creation. Have you ever examined the feather of a bird? I almost think a feather is the masterpiece of nature. No man in the world could make such a thing, nor anything in the slightest degree resembling it. He goes on to say, the scales on the wing of a moth have no explanation in evolution. They belong to beauty. Arid beauty is a spiritual mystery. What is the origin of beauty? Evolution cannot explain. Indeed, why indeed are a butterfly, a deer, and an antelope beautiful? It seems to me that Wallace nicely summarizes his work when he says, "My contribution is made as a man of science, as a naturalist, as a man who studies his surroundings to see where he is." And the conclusion that I reach in my book is this: that everywhere, not here and there, but everywhere, and in the smallest operations of nature to which human observation has penetrated, there is purpose and a continual guidance and control. Wallace dared to go beyond the science of his day to achieve a profounder understanding. The most serious transgression in the Bible is idolatry. Back then it seems that the tendency to genuflect before an image of stone or of wood was quite compelling. Today, modern idolatry takes the form of obeisance before the science. We will not genuflect. We will not kowtow before it. We will use our moral and spiritual abilities to go beyond the science and to go, brothers and sisters, from renewal to regeneration and on to the redemption of this American earth. Thank you indeed for permitting me to share a few ideas.